Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Varsity Tutors StarCourse series, where in today's class, we are so excited to draw on the expert experience of our favorite TikTok animator, Audrey Hopkins, to try our hand at the art of animation. So whether you know Audrey from her wildly popular TikTok account, Oddity Draws, or from past classes with us at Varsity Tutors, you know that she is an expert in turning some pretty wild ideas from mashups to inanimate objects brought to life into reality. And today we're going to learn all about one of the toughest talents to master, how we can maintain our character as it reacts and expresses emotion. And along the way, Audrey will show us that, like any artistic skill, this is a journey of continual improvement that takes lots and lots of practice. So speaking of practice, we're going to have the opportunity today to try out some of the techniques that Audrey will be introducing us to. So you will want to have plenty of paper and pencil handy. So probably several sheets of paper so that you can follow along either directly or put your own spin, put your own creativity on some of the things we'll be drawing today. Now, we'll also have the opportunity to ask questions throughout today's lesson. So feel free to use the chat panel on the right-hand side of the screen. And if we don't get to those questions immediately, not to worry, we're going to save a couple of minutes toward the end of the lesson specifically for Q&A. You'll also want to be sure that you have your cameras close by, because toward the end of the lesson, we're going to have the opportunity to lean into the screen, possibly with the artwork you've been following along with, and pose for a selfie. And if you post that selfie on Instagram and you tag us here at Varsity Tutors, as well as Audrey with her Oddity tag, you'll be entered to win a 1-month membership, or a 1-week membership, pardon me, to the virtual summer camp of your choice. And I'll talk a little bit more about that prize and how to enter toward the end of the lesson. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and pass things along to your instructor for today, Audrey Hopkins.
Thank you so much, Haley. Yeah, and as she said, we're going to basically be learning about character expressions, redrawing characters with different expressions, and building your character's personality and how that influences how they're going to look. So to start out with, I thought I would show you a character that I drew, I believe was 7 or 8 years ago now. This is Jackie. Jackie was made because of an assignment in school where we had to make a Jack and the Beanstalk remake with our own characters and own story. And so this was my main character, Jackie. Now, I thought she would be a good character to use for today. However, I redrew her in my more like recent style, I guess you could say. So this is how I would imagine Jackie now. But this isn't the only way that one can imagine her. So I have another version of her right here. This is, I think I like to call her Pancake Jackie. She just looks like a little pancake, you know? Like as I'm introducing these two characters, if you guys want to use one of these drawings of Jackie today for your purposes of drawing, that's totally fine. Or if you want to use the similar character and build your own, or use a character you've already made before, that's all great. As I'm doing this next part, if you guys want to make your characters or follow along, either is great. And with that, here we go. So when you're making a character, we've gone through before in other classes how to like build a character and everything. So with a character that's already set up, the next thing you need to know is when you want to start doing expressions and other things with your character. Now for today, we're going to focus mainly on the faces. We're not going to do whole body, so don't worry about that. But the first thing you want to do before you start drawing your character in other ways is to map out their expression. Now for that, I'm going to use a few different colors, and I'm also going to take these characters' opacity down so you guys can see what I'm doing a little bit better. So this is almost like math in a way. So I'm going to look at like what shapes kind of make her up so that when I go to redraw her, it's just a little easier and I understand. So you see we have kind of like this oval shape that I use for her head here with a triangle down below. Her neck is quite thin, comes out right there, her ear, and that's about all we're going to do for that part of it. And the next part I want to map out is her facial features. For that, I'm going to use green. So you can see her eyes are quite round as well, maybe a little bit more oval-like. You can see they have about the amount of space in between them as another eyeball. In most character design, like classes and other things like that, you kind of learn with your own face as well. If you look at your own face, there's about amount of space of your own eyeball in between your eyeballs. And so when you're building a character, you can use that, or you can break it, which you'll see in the next thing I'm going to do. But her eyes are right there. Then for the rest of her face, I'm going to use blue. And you want to kind of identify what parts of your character that you're drawing are really like unique. So for her, she has a very distinct nose, as well as her mouth is quite high up. Like you can see her mouth kind of coincides with this line right here. And if I go back to this red, you can see like I have her eyes and they're like that. So you just kind of, you're basically creating a map and like this is how you're going to know your character and like be able to draw them again. So I know it just looks like we're tracing over it, and that's kind of what you're doing in a way, but it's sort of like helping you understand the shapes better. And you're kind of breaking them up into simplified versions. And so we're gonna do the same thing now with Pancake Jackie. And for Pancake Jackie, we're gonna use red as well. So for her, unlike how complex the other version of Jackie is, Pancake Jackie is just a big old circle. It's a big old circle with ears, which is going to make her character design very different, and her expressions also very different from the other version of Jackie. So now let's do the green for the eyes. Just two big old round eyes. And then for her, you can see some stuff unique about her face is that I basically didn't give her a nose. It's quite flat there, and her smile is really simple and quite small. Everything about her face too is kind of concentrated in the middle. It's not like spread out. There's no space in between her eyes almost. And so that's kind of like the characteristics you can look at on her that make her unique as a character. Okay. So now that we have our map of the character, it means that this just makes it a little easier for us to redraw it. So like really quickly, I'm going to do another drawing of her up here using this map. And by the way, if you're still creating your character right now, that's totally fine. Continue what you're doing. Be creative, have fun. I can't wait to see if any of you create your own pancake characters. They're fun, they're fun. They're good breakfast friends, you know? So knowing what I do about her face, I can see that like, based on my map, her eyeballs are around here. And her nose right there, and her mouth right here. Now, this is just me redrawing the character that I've already drawn, but because of the map that I've created, I understand her a lot better and where things are placed. So I can recreate her easier than just trying to like eyeball it and guess where things go. So this shape back here is almost like a square for her ponytail that kind of tapers off at the bottom. You can see that's pretty much Jackie. I mean, it's a little different because I'm going a little faster, but based on that, I was able to recreate her quite easily, which is perfect for what we're going into next. So now that we have our maps created on our two different Jackies, the next thing I want to talk to you guys about is how to like know your character as a person, because that really does help when creating your character's emotions and how they react. So by that, I mean, for Jackie, when I created her, I made Jackie quite, she was very adventurous, courageous. So she had lots of courage. She's very witty, a bit overconfident, and a bit clumsy sometimes. So that's kind of like what I think of her as a person. The reason this is so important is that if I was creating a character that was very wimpy, then if I was going to make like a drawing of them and I wanted that character to react to, let's say they're in a dungeon somewhere and a dragon comes up on them, Jackie is probably, based on her character, her reaction to that dragon is probably gonna be like, oh boy, I have to stand my ground, really, you know, I'm gonna fight my way through this and everything's gonna be okay. I have so much courage and I'm not afraid of this dragon. Somebody who's a wimpy character, who's a bit more, you know, scared, they may stand up to the dragon, but the way that they're going to do it is going to look very different from Jackie. You know, for them, their reaction is going to be much more like, oh no, okay, I think I have to do this, but oh, I'm so freaked out. So that distinction is really going to help you, like when you're trying to make expressions for your character, you need to understand them as a person rather than just drawing like, you know, oh, I think the character looks nice this way. And that's totally fine too. But for building a character in the world of trying to make like an animation out of them, like I would be doing. So some tools that you can use for this as well. I have a mirror. So if you have a mirror or a phone or just something that reflects your image back to you, so you can kind of like make the faces that you think your character is going to make. So like for, you know, for her, I'd be like, oh, if she's going to be angry, like let's look at like our angry face. You can see like my eyebrows have really dropped down. My nose is a bit more flared. I have like kind of a grimace on my face, and that's not going to be the same for every single person, but using your own face as a reference really does help. And it kind of helps you feel it out too. For example, back in the day when people were working on Tarzan, a lot of the animators would run around the office, like on all hands and fours, and like just to understand how gorillas would move. And kind of sounds like a wild time to be there, but yeah, so like, you know, using your own face as a reference kind of helps you feel out how your character is going to look. So the other way you can do that is also by using references. So here's some old artwork that I've made over the years, and you can see what I was talking about with like each character. You know, with Jackie, she's a very confident person. She's very caring, but like, you know, confident, overconfident person. So I drew her in kind of like a cocky way. With this character, is a lemon boy that I made. He's very sour and kind of mean. So you can kind of see that just based on his character design and his expression. So that's what we're going to do with this next. Okay. And the other way you can do some help with some facial expressions is by getting up some reference images. So for those that don't know, this is my husband. I took some pictures of him before the class, and I labeled them for the different emotions. So I thought we'd go through real quick. And before we start drawing these guys with their different expressions, I want to show you guys how I would analyze this as faces and how we can use these expressions to help with our own characters. So for Happy, you can see he has like standard this, the teeth are showing, kind of a normal looking nose. His eyes are open somewhat, but not a ton. And the eyebrows are up higher. For Scared, you can see his eyes are not touching the sides of the eyeball. Again, that's raised. The mouth, actually, it's hard to tell just because of his beard, but his mouth is actually dropped down a bit away from his nose. So kind of like that kind of a look. Again, if you want to look in your mirrors, you can kind of see what I'm talking about. For Suspicious, we have like these inward turned eyebrows that drop down on top of the eye, which is what you'd also do for Angry. And his eyes are very like small as well. Again, the nose isn't doing much, but the face is just a little like almost look disgusted in a way as well. For Sad, the eyes have dropped down, but the middle of them has gone up. And his eyeball is touching the top part of his eye, and then his mouth is also dropped down in this as well. So the goal of this is not to, when you look at these images and you look at your references, the goal is not to make your character have that exact expression necessarily. It's to use that expression to help inform your own character. So let's really quickly use this version of Jackie for this. So I'm going to pick one of these facial expressions to put her in. And I would, so with your guys' characters as well, let's do, which one of these is the silliest looking? Let's do Shocked. Let's do Shocked. Let's do Shocked Richard face on Jackie. So we have our map over here, and using our map that we've drawn, I'm going to first do a quick little outline of Jackie's face. And you can do this with your characters as well. Just do a quick little outline. Don't worry too about trying to stay too perfect, because as you're drawing, you want to keep your movements fluid. And then once you get a doodle and drawing down, that's when you can go back in and make changes and make things look a bit more accurate. So for Shocked, again, we see that her eyes are going to be a bit bigger. We're still wanting to keep the shape of her eyes, but I can make them a little bit wider and then raise her eyebrows up as well. And then her nose, her very distinct nose that we have right here. Whoop, too big. The map is a really helpful thing. It almost feels like a math class when you're making it, but it really does help a lot. I'm just erasing some of these lines so you guys can see what I'm doing. And then again, her mouth, you can see his mouth drop down a bit. Her mouth is very close to her nose usually, but for this, I'm going to drop it down just a little bit so that it looks even more shocked. Okay, we have her little hair bits and her ponytail over here. So you see, we've pretty easily now recreated a very sketchy look of it, but like the same character with a very different expression. And we're gonna do the same thing with Pancake Jackie here. So let's take Pancake Jackie. and do a nice drawing of her face as well. Hers is a little bit easier. So, and there really is no, like, neither one of these characters is better than the other. They're just very different styles. So depending on which one you're using, or if you're having your own character, these rules are going to be different from character to character. So for her, her expression isn't going to be as, I can't do as much with her face and get as weird as I could with Pancake Jackie. And I'll show you what I mean. So with Pancake Jackie, because she is so cartoony, like more so than the other cartoon Jackie, I can kind of push her expression more. And that's what really, like, references are great, and like, you know, you can use them to help you inform on your character, but I think it speaks so much more when you can take a reference and push it and like really use it to make your character even crazier. So now you see I've really raised her eyes and made them really big. And now for the nose, she doesn't really have one, but it's still going to be there. And then for her mouth, I'm really going to push it and make it really far down here. And I'm also going to change the shape a little bit more than the one with Rich. So you can see I've used that expression that he did and I've analyzed it, but I've made the character have a bit more to her than the picture of the other facial expression. There we go. And this is also what's important about making the map for your character's face, is that you want to stay consistent as you draw your character. And that's a really hard thing to do. And it takes years of practice to be able to do that. But you want to stay consistent so that when you draw your character with different expressions, it still looks like them. Especially if you're creating like an expression sheet, or if you're doing like an animation with a character, you want them to look the same. You don't want them to like change their entire facial structure later on if other things are happening. So you can see we have these two characters that we've created again with different facial expressions. Okay. So I think we're going to do another round, and this time we're going to focus on something that's really dramatic. We're going to pick one of these expressions, but we're going to push it to basically its limit with one of these faces. So for this, I'm going to use Pancake Jackie again. I'm going to start with the oval. Make that cross. And I'm going to try this time to do all the stuff that informs her as a character very lightly underneath, so it's not like getting in the way of her face. So the hair is right there, very lightly. And because also we can go back later and make changes. Nothing has to be perfect the first time. In fact, it won't be. If it is, then you have magic in your hands, my friend, because I have never been able to accomplish anything perfect the first time. Let's do sad for this one. So with his face, his is just the upper eyebrows, but let me look at my own mirror again. Looks sad. You can see the underside of my eyes is also being pulled up into my eyeballs. So we're going to try that as well. Is the upper part. Okay. Oh, that's a sad face right there. That's a very sad face right there. And then the mouth, you know, if I was going to just copy the picture of him up here, I would just do a simple little, oh, like that. And that does work. That works, but I want more. I want to do something more dramatic. I want to take her to the next level. So I'm really going to exaggerate her mouth right here. I'm going to add like teeth in there too. There we go. So it still looks like her, but I've taken it and like sort of, you know how before I said like, oh, you know, her mouth is usually quite small and quite close to her face. And that is the rule for most of her ordinary expressions. She's going to have a very small mouth that's very close to her nose. But on super exaggerated poses where we really want to nail home different emotions in animation, you have to take some of the rules and just throw them out the window. You got to just toss them out there, and you have to break them and really exaggerate and overdo it with your facial expressions. And even this, I could take this further if I wanted to. I could really push this. But it still looks like her though. And that's the main thing we want to do when building these character expressions. Okay. All right. And you can also use other artworks for this. Like sometimes if I'm having a hard time with like sometimes looking at real pictures of faces doesn't quite nail home the expressions for you. It's a little hard to like transfer them to your own cartoony artworks. It's okay to look at other people's work. So I sometimes will look at like my old work and be like, all right, how did I do, this one? I see his face is very turned up here. He has a very turned up mouth. So I could do something like that with my character. And I can see that like one eye is bigger than the other. And that like can indicate, some bit of sass or stuff like that. So it's totally okay to use other people's artwork as examples. You don't want to copy other people what they're doing, but we learn, it's sort of like when you look at Da Vinci's artwork, you look at the masters to learn how they did it. You don't have to wait until an artist is thousands of years old to do that. You can look at artists. There's so many amazing artists out there around us that we can learn from. That's how I've learned most of what I've learned is from other people that I've met and that I've gotten to interact with. So yeah. All right, so now I think what we can do is take one of these expressions and make a more finished character. But actually, before we do that, let's take one more of this Jackie and do something with her. So let's do a suspicious face with her. I'm going to move the other Jackie out of the way for this one. Hold on. Just move her down there. Okay. So now, using this Jackie and the map that I've made, we're going to do a suspicious look, but we're going to do it very exaggerated. So again, starting with the simple shapes, but doing it lightly so that you can go over it and make it better afterwards. Her ear connects right there at that junction. Her eyeballs are going to be up here, her nose right there, and her mouth right at that junction. Bring down the neck and the hair. And this also, doing this helps you figure out what parts of your character really make them distinct. When you're drawing a character, if you can recognize that character in silhouette, that means you have a really good character. If you take The Simpsons, for example, and put them in silhouette, you'll still recognize them as The Simpsons. And that's because they have such distinct character design to them. All right, so for suspicious, her eyes are going to need to be really narrowed. So I'm still keeping the same shape to them. She has those oval eyes. I'm going to narrow them and I'm going to bring down her eyebrows right here. Just kind of, sorry. That's another thing too. You might find that as you're doing this, you're making the facial expressions that you're doing. And that's great. That's a good sign. If you're making the facial expressions that you're drawing, that's a really good sign. All right. And then her nose, I'm actually going to, his nose isn't scrunched up, but I'm actually going to scrunch her nose up a little bit and give just a little bit of extra lines to her nostril right there. And then her mouth, I'm actually, instead of bringing it down like his, I'm going to bring it up more. And kind of more of like a disgust sort of like, kind of way like that. And put like a little line that connects the two, because as you can see, you have that kind of line that goes down right here along your nose that meets your mouth. It's hard though sometimes, and you can kind of see it. I did it with her a little bit to not make them look too old while doing that. So maybe instead of connecting it completely, just doing a little bit of a line right there, just so that she doesn't look like she's aged a lot. That's something really easy to do when drawing, is to accidentally age your characters up or down. If you want to make a character look younger, giving them bigger eyes and bigger head versus body ratio. Like this character looks a lot younger than her, but it's just because of the way she's drawn. Okay, you can see I've made this eye a little bit big, so I'm just going to grab it and shrink it a little bit. All right, I'll go back in and nail down some of these features. And with that, we've pretty simply created another expression. All right. So we've done a lot of really quick, simple sketches already. But I would like to take one sketch from each of these characters and take it to finish. So I think for Pancake Jackie, I'm going to do the sad face and take that to a more finished look. and exaggerate it and show you guys how we'd go about that. And for her, I think I'm going to do this, this suspicious look. So let's take these two drawings. And we're still looking at our maps and everything. Let me just put her back up here next to her map. There we go. Fit you right in there. And move the disgusted Jackie down here. So we're going to take each of these and we're going to now do like proper line work and really take them to finish. So this is where it is a bit more important to try to stick to your character's design. You want to be a little tighter, less loose in this phase. So I'm actually going to switch to my dry ink brush. If you want to switch to a pen, that's fine. If you want to do this with pencil, that's also fine. Whatever you're drawing with, totally fine. But for those who are curious, I have now switched to a dry ink brush on Procreate. Let's start with this one. So we still have her over there, but let's really try to nail home. So when you're doing finished work, this is not always for everybody, but I like to do thick and thin lines on my characters. They kind of add a bit more dimension. The thicker lines tend to be where there's more shadow, and the thinner lines are where it's a bit lighter. It just adds a bit more dimension and gives your drawing somewhat more of a realistic feel while also still being a cartoon. You can see I'm kind of exaggerating the drawing I did before even more. And just to nail down that she's like sad, I'm going to make her eyeballs really big, and I might even add a little bit of shine to them, just to really get that, oh no, little look, you know. Okay, and then her nose, it's kind of round and just right there. And then now for this mouth. Now, and the other thing I didn't talk about before, but I've actually raised up her head a little bit so that as she's sad, she's looking more up like this. You could do either one, but for her, I think since she's yelling and being sad and she's like maybe crying, she's going to be turned up a little bit more in the face. Also, as I was talking about before, with this Jackie, I feel like if she is going to have a sad emotion, because she is so caring about others as a person and as a character that I've built, she's going to react strongly if she's sad. There are times when she's going to knuckle through it and be like, I'm sad, but I'm going to hold through this. But if something really affects her, I think it's going to really affect her. And you're going to really be able to see it on her face. Okay. Let's really stretch this. Let's really stretch this expression here. I always think of this as like the upsy downsy U shape. You're just taking what you would do for like a face and just flipping it. And it makes it so much more exaggerated, sad. And don't be afraid to make mistakes, because good art is born out of mistakes. Some of the best stuff I've done is stuff that I was like, I wasn't intending to draw it that way, but if I'm not happy about the way it turned out, I swear. Happy accidents. I think that's what Bob Ross called them, happy accidents. Okay. So I'm just trying to really exaggerate this pose down here. Get some of those bottom teeth in right here. And with your guys' character, you guys can do whatever pose you guys want, but if you're doing this, try to think about maybe how your character would react if they were sad. Would they be bawling like this? Are they a bit more stoic? Are they like, you know, some big, strong character that's like, I do not cry. I laugh in the face of sadness. And if so, how would they react if they were sad? Would it be something that is horribly like, oh, like this? Or would it be something that's just a single tear dropping down their face? Those kinds of distinctions are what are going to take your character to the next level and make them more realistic and make your expression stand out more. Because as people, we can feel when something feels real and feels like relatable. I'll bring this tongue down a little bit. It's a little too high. There we go. So I'm going to bring this tooth down. There we go. Look at that. That is an upset Jackie. And I'm gonna also add a little bit of line under here for your lip. You're like, I think this one's called a Cupid's bow. I don't know what this one's called. Maybe your pout lines. That's what I would call them. And I might add a little bit of like some tear marks. Okay. Now looking back at the way I did her hair, it looks like I'm actually wanting to do it more like this, where this is spread out a bit more across the top. And then this comes out of there. Oops, sorry. We have a line right here and a line right there. And then her ear, which is actually a little smaller now that I look at it. And the rest of her face. And let's also, I'm going to take down the background a little bit on there so you guys can see what I'm doing a little bit better. There we go. Add the other ear. Look at that one over there, still like this. Yep. Pancake Jackie is having a bad brunch. All right, now the other thing we can do is make little changes to her design based on her emotions. So because she is so sad and so disheveled, I actually might make her hair stick up in a weird way that it doesn't usually do that because she is so distressed. And that's a good way, like breaking your character design in those kind of ways is again, one of those times where you have to know when to break the rules. So for this, I'm making her hair a lot more disheveled, like she's been through some stuff maybe. She got past the dragon, but whoa, was it hard and it took a lot out of her. Is that overconfidence, right? Okay. So you see, this is still, it still looks like her, but it's her with a lot of emotion. We've all been there, right? We've all been there. Okay. So now let's do the other Jackie. And we're going to push her expression to the limit as well. And I'm going to leave the picture of Jackie up here so you guys can see it so I can reference her. So again, we're going to take her eyes. Actually, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Hold on. Let me take away these Richard photos. I'm going to drag this drawing up here and draw it right here. Okay, that way we can see a little bit better. We don't all have Batman eyes. All right, so like before, I'm going to make her eyes a bit more closed, but I'm actually going to leave the underside a bit rounded still. Because I feel like the other way just, it differed a little bit too much from her character. And unlike Pancake Jackie, I can't get away with as much exaggeration with this because she is a bit more detailed. So if I change her up and do too many weird things with her, it's no longer going to look like her. Add a little bit of lines for the scowl. There we go. Rounded underside. All right, and I'm actually going to take away that lift on the nose that I originally said because I'm realizing it doesn't quite have her facial expression to it. So I'm actually going to go back to the normal Jackie nose. Like this. And for her mouth, I realized I also over here, this is the stuff when you're doing your sketches, this is the kind of stuff you realize when you go back into the finish. I realized I gave her too much of a, if it is a Cupid's bow, too much roundness right here. That's another way that you can age up your characters is adding more of that. You know, older ladies tend to have kind of more of an exaggerated Cupid's bow, at least in the animation world. Okay. Now, the bottom of her mouth, I might actually close her mouth for this. So it looks more like she's scowling. Take away a little bit of the line right here, again with those thick and thin lines. And a little bit more of a chin jut outness right here. So it looks like she's more like, you know, add things where they're necessary, but don't overdo it either. I made that mistake a lot back in the day and I made a lot of wrinkly characters that were not supposed to be wrinkly. because I just got so excited to add extra lines. That's why old people are really fun to draw. She has an earring right over here. Okay. And if I were going to add in her shoulders, I actually might add like some lift on one of them. So it looks like she's kind of like hunched like this. Just do that for the sake of the argument. Okay. All right. So now let's do the back of her head. We have her hairline as well, which if you notice, I still, even though they're different like designs, you can see I still mimicked a lot of the same shapes. Like I kept her mouth close to her nose like hers is here, and I mimicked the same shapes that I did with the hair. It's just different ways of drawing. Doesn't have to be different characters, just different ways. There's no good way, no bad way. There's just art. And art is awesome and super fun. Okay. So her ponytail has kind of a squareness to it as well, just like Pancake Jackie's, but hers is longer. It has a very straight down, slender way. And I add these extra lines sometimes to kind of add depth to my character's hair. But there we go. There we go. We have our two more detailed versions of these characters now. And I think if we have time, I can color them. So that way you guys can really see that with all the skills that we've learned today, which let me recap for you, making a character, making a map out of their face, finding references for expressions, using your own face for reference for expressions, pushing those expressions and mapping them out with your character in mind. So you're not just, if I were to just copy Rich's face, their facial features would be way more different than if I were to actually try to like merge the look that his facial expressions were with their actual facial structure. And then taking that all together into account and redrawing a character so that they still look like themselves, but they have an entirely different expression now. I think we can at least do it with small Jackie. We'll color in, we have to, well, let's be honest, Pancake Jackie's our favorite. Let's color in Pancake Jackie. So what I like to do when going into this phase of a drawing is actually take one color, and I usually do skin tone, so it's easier, but I like to fill in the entire shape. And if you're doing this not on a tablet, don't do it this way, unless you have watercolor or something, but you won't be able to erase. So just know that if you're doing it on a tablet, you can do this way. If not, go piece by piece and color it that way. If you're doing it on a tablet, this is the best way to do it. And sorry if you hear noises in the background, my cats are in here. Okay. And there's the purple hair that she has that's distinguishing for her. That's another way you can use like distinguish your characters is color. Having a good color palette, like there's actually I think a filter online right now where you can run around and you can guess character design by the color palette that you see. So like if I were to show you a certain shade of red and black and gold together, half of you would be able to be like, that's Mickey Mouse right there. I recognize that. So that's another way to have good character design, is to have very good color palette that distinguishes your character. And that doesn't mean you have to do something crazy, not at all. Doesn't mean that you have to do like wild and crazy colors that don't necessarily make sense. But it does lend itself to people recognizing your character. Okay. And I never actually picked a tongue color for her, I'm realizing. It's kind of a weird thing to say, but I didn't have that design. So usually for a tongue, I do something like kind of a grayish pink. Some people do bright pink. It works. It works for some people. It's just, you know, character design. All right. And then I like to add a little bit of blood, especially if she is upset in this picture. She's going to have a bit of blush to her face over here, especially around her eyes. If you've been crying or something like that, you get very red, puffy eyes. So for that, we're going to do that here. And there we go. And it seems like a lot, but somehow just sometimes that kind of works, you know, like if it looks like she's been crying here, then then that's going to work actually quite well. And even like with the cryingness, I'm going to take a very unrealistic blue and go over top of here, but then I'm going to opacity it down so you can barely see it. There we go. We got another version of Jackie, of Pancake Jackie. So yeah, I think as you guys are finishing up your characters, I can't wait to see them. But I think that's pretty much it on how to build a character, make different expressions, how to use references, and how to map out your character and use all this information as a way to build your own character in more detail as a person, and like with their facial structures and everything. Just really understanding your character both physically and mentally leads to better character design, better expressions, and yeah, better art in general. So I hope that helps.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much, Audrey. And as students are wrapping up their artwork, could you give us a quick reminder so that they have just a bit of time to catch up before we get to that selfie opportunity?
Yeah.
We gave two versions of Jackie here. We had Pancake Jackie, and we had our not Pancake Jackie. It is perfectly fine if you chose to draw both versions. It is perfectly fine if you chose to draw just one of the two. We even had some pretty awesome comments and suggestions on how in some sort of maybe parallel timeline, parallel universe, they might one day get to meet. But
I'd love that.
Us, what are some of the advantages or disadvantages on which version of Jackie people might prefer to draw?
Okay, so like a good way to distinguish between these two for me would be, I would say Pancake Jackie is more of like a TV style animation, like Cartoon Network styled animation. And by that, I mean, with Pancake Jackie, she's very easy to draw and very easy to animate. And so that makes animating her and moving her around quicker, which means if you're doing a lot of TV animation, which is faster paced, that's going to be easier to do. With normal Jackie, she's much more suited towards film. That doesn't mean they couldn't make a TV show that looks like this as well, but she's more suited to film because her animation and the way that she's drawn is much more detailed, and it's going to take a lot of extra work to move her around. Does that kind of answer your question?
Absolutely. And we had definitely some students who were interested in drawing both versions and some who maybe were moving a little bit slower and chose to just focus on one. And both of those are wonderful. Speaking of which, we want to see those images in your selfies. So let's go ahead and take a moment now for those selfies. As a quick reminder, if you post those selfies on Instagram and you tag us here at Varsity Tutors, as well as Audrey with her oddity tagline, I'll put those up on screen at the very end of the class. You'll be entered to win that 1-week membership to the virtual summer camp of your choice. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Audrey.
All right. So I'm going to try to get this. It's kind of awkward to take a picture with the tablet, but we can all make the face that she's making. Let's do a smiling one first. Do you want it? No, we gotta make the Pancake Jackie face. Are you guys ready? Oh, eyes are open though. There we go. Oh, my headphones now too. I'm just losing it.
That is wonderful. And if you haven't had a chance to take that selfie just yet, not to worry, we're going to take an extra couple of minutes to hang out and answer some of the wonderful questions that you guys have asked. Yeah. So let's go ahead and get to it. One question that we got a lot was around your preference on the types of tools, perhaps the app that you're using and some of the settings. Yeah. Could you talk to us a little bit about some of your preferences for artistic tools and some of the stuff you were using today?
Absolutely. So when I'm drawing, I tend to use this brush on here. So first of all, I'm using Procreate, and I don't know if you want to like have the view on my tablet real quick right now, or do you want me to hold it up? Okay, yeah. So on here, I'm using Procreate, which is a great tool on the iPad. It's like it's like Photoshop, but it's just a little bit more accessible for artists. But I'm using the 6B sketching pencil. It's the most like a real pencil to me. So it feels like I'm drawing on paper a bit more, and I find that really great for sketching, and some people even use it for outlining as well. For my outlining brush, I go down here to inking and I go to the dry ink brush. It's kind of just this like more craggly, let me see if I can show it to you. More like a craggly, why is this not? That's odd. Oh, I see why. Oops, 1 second. Okay, so you see it's like, it's not perfect. It's a bit more craggly, but I kind of like that. I don't like my line work to be like perfect because then I feel like I get constrained too much on trying to make it perfect. So that's what I use. And then for when I do inking, coloring and stuff, I use the technical pen. But this is just a preference, like for me. Every single artist uses a ton of different brushes, and I even mix and match in these sometimes, like if I'm doing different things. But that's basically what I use. If I'm drawing in person, I honestly use like the cheapest 2B pencils that you can find at like Staples, and whatever kind of paper I can get my hands on. If I had a preference, I'd probably say the recycled sketchbooks that you can get at the store at like Michael's and things like that. But yeah, those are the main tools that I use. But yeah, definitely. I mean, if you have the opportunity to draw on an iPad, I really recommend it. It just makes it a little bit faster, and you're not like using as much materials. And also this way you can try out different art styles without having to go out and buy a ton of watercolors only to realize that you don't like watercolors. So yeah, I hope that kind of answers that question.
Awesome. Yeah. And we've heard it from the expert. You don't necessarily need a lot of very fancy tools to practice and to become, become skilled at your art. Now, we also had a really interesting question around whether you would ever make any changes. We talked about some stuff that stayed the same with Jackie, whether you would make any changes to Jackie, and maybe if you've done so already.
I definitely already did, and I can show her again. Let me just get rid of all the other stuff that we've drawn so that I can focus on the original ones real quick. Turn on the old Jackie. So the old Jackie, I still like her design. It's still fun and everything. I made her really simple and easy to animate because I actually do have an animatic of her floating around somewhere. But I give her very stick legs and everything's kind of piecey, and that's great. It works great, but it's just not the way I draw now. And it's not really my preference for the way I draw. So for now, like what I would change about her is instead of also giving her these long sleeves, I did them just on her elbows because I really liked the idea of getting to play with her clothes and do something more interesting than just having a t-shirt with long sleeve underneath. I also took her shorts and added these little bits of they're sort of like the fringe that come off of your pants. However, I wanted to look weirder, so I just did big spikes coming off. Yeah, and the stuff I kept the same though is I kept like the tallness of her, like she has really long legs. Even here in the shorter version, she still has fairly long legs, and each time she also has really thin limbs compared to the rest of her as well. I put her hair up, and the reason I put her hair up was that for animation purposes, there's a lot more you can do with a hairstyle that's up than down. At least for me, when I used to animate, is you have a lot of like this sort of motion that you wouldn't get as easily with your hair just being down. So yeah, that's the kind of stuff I changed. And just, I mean, it's just time. It's been 7 years since I drew her, so just time changes, you draw different. Every single day you draw different than the day before.
Awesome. That is great. And we also had a lot of really interesting questions. We talked a little bit about how to maintain our character when creating expressions. We had lots of questions around opposites. So how we could show a character with a particular emotion that isn't typical for them, or maybe even how we could use a different body position from the expression on someone's face to really prove a point. So could you talk a little bit about how body positioning and shape plays into that? I know we focused a little bit more on facial expressions, and any fun opposites that can really drive home a point.
So there's a lot of different stuff about this. Like the stuff I taught you right now was actually the amount of information I just explained to you guys was something that when I took character design classes was taught to me over the span of like 3 months, and it was done in a lot more detail. So this was very much a crash course in just facial expression. When you get into body, it gets even more complicated. So like it's basically, I mean, you yourself as an animator, you are an actor. You're just using your drawings for the acting. That's really all it is. So for when you're doing stuff with your body and drawing body positions, you have to first think about like how it would actually be like in real life in a way. Like if you have a character who's scared and they're hiding or something, they're probably going to get into like the fetal position. Now, if you get into the design portion of it and you want to make that look really interesting and cool, you can get into straight line versus curved line. So when you're making a character, let's see if I can have to turn my chair for this and try to show this. But like, let's say you have a character right here and like you have her face being very curved right here. If this is like the front, look at those 2 eyes. This is some good eyes right there. Oh, this is a great example. But anyways, if you have that character right there, so you have these curved lines. If you have the back of them being very straight, it just makes for a much interesting like more interesting look. And you do the same thing throughout the whole body. So if they're hunched over, you're going to have like a lot of curved lines for like where their stomach is, but you have very straight lines for their back. So design wise, that's something you can do to make the poses look interesting. But for like, I think your question was also when you have a character that you like, you want to do facial expressions that are very different from like what type of person that they are. So for that, it's really, you just have to delve into what kind of person is your character. So, you know, for, like I said before, if you have a very wimpy character, if you're going to have them do something brave, you have to really think about how a wimpy character would do something brave. If they finally did stand up to somebody, maybe they would have like a really angry, like I could do this look on their face because they're trying to protect somebody, but they have tears coming down their eyes or something because it's still just so hard for them and they're scared and their hair standing on end because they're still terrified, but by gun it, they're gonna stay there and they're gonna defend their friend from the dragon. So things like that, it just boils down to, you need to know your character inside and out as a person, and be able to show that in like your drawings. So a lot of it is with just practice and just trial and error. I mean, when I create a character and I want to do some weird pose, usually I go through like 10 or 15 doodles before I finally nail down like one of them that I like. So I hope that helps answer the question a bit.
That's awesome. And we actually had a really, really similar follow-up question to that. We talked a little bit about creating a character and how even some things that we wouldn't see written, since certainly this is visual art as opposed to written art, we kind of need to know how they would react, how they would respond to certain situations. So for someone who's maybe a little bit newer to animation, what are some questions that we might ask to get a better understanding of our character and to how to build out that character's personality?
Yeah, so my character design teacher, his name is Walter, wonderful man. He had this exercise that we would do where he would put out the cheapest pieces of paper, hand us big fat Sharpies and be like, all right, now draw your character if they saw this, or draw your character if they saw that. So he'd be like, draw your character if they saw a free pizza. It's like, well, my character is somebody who is very like stuck up. So their reaction to pizza is probably going to be like, oh, this is what we're having to eat. Whereas my friend's character at the time was, I think, like really rambunctious and like childlike. So they were really excited and like, I want the first piece, and running over to it. So things like that, like asking yourself random situations and being like, how would my character interact or react in this situation? You know, how would my character react if they were playing with their favorite ball and it suddenly popped? Would they get really sad and cry? Would they try to fix it? You know, would they run to a parent and be like, I would like a new one, mother? Or they're very uppity like that. Just things like that. You're almost meeting your character as a person. I would say you're sort of like getting to know them the way that you get to know a stranger. It's kind of fun actually, but you're in charge of what the stranger does. So, you know.
Very cool. We even got to see a little bit of that in action on how things like a person's character might influence the way their hair will look and
yep.
the blush on their cheeks along the way. So that is super, super interesting. Now, I want to take things back to the very, very beginning of the lesson where we started to map out those characters' faces. Could you talk to us a little bit more about why you chose to use different colors in how you map that out and how that contributes to things?
I mean, that just boils down to, it's easier to see. Like if I can actually show you right now, I can take this this drawing or the map I did over top of her right now. You see how when it's different colors, you can see what's going on fairly easy, and you can like, it helps you go in sections. So red is the first thing I usually do. So when you're drawing a character, a lot of times you'll do like the outline of the character's face and everything first before you start adding in the details. So you can focus on just the one section a little easier than you would if I were to take this whole thing and just alpha lock, take a painting brush and just, that is suddenly way harder to see how your map is. I can't tell what to do first. This is just a doodle at this point. It's not a map. It's just, it helps trick your brain into understanding it and kind of piecing it apart. And like, it helps you go step by step basically in building your character. And you're not like worried about, oh my God, this is just all too much information at once. So that's why I do different like colors. My instructors always did different. It's one of those things that, you know, it's passed down through the ages. The older generation teaches the younger generation. We do it too. Is sort of what this is, but it works. It works. So yeah, different colors. Make your maps.
Awesome. Well, now we'll have something when our aspiring artists go on to teach the next generation that they'll be able to pass along as well. Oh, yeah. Now, it is getting to be about that time, so we'll leave things with maybe just one more question. We had lots and lots of questions around how you found your artistic style. We saw a little bit how it changed over the course of time and things that students can do to help find their artistic style as well.
So this is probably the most common question that I get asked is how you find your style. And unfortunately, the answer is not one I think people really like, is that you're going to be the last person to know that you have a style. All style is muscle memory. You're teaching yourself how to draw in certain ways. And for me, for finding your style, I would say, I just looked at other people's work and went, I really like the way that they color noses a little bit darker than the rest of their character. I think I'll start doing that a little bit on mine. Or, you know, I like the way that they tend to draw legs. I'm going to see if I can sort of incorporate that into my work. Things like that, as well as just over time, you start to see things a bit more. You know, the way I drew eyes back in the day, I thought I was like nailing it. And now I look back and I'm like, oh man, I didn't know what I was doing as much as I do now. So it's just over time, you're going to build a certain way that you draw, but also don't worry about trying to find a style. I'm under the belief that having one way to draw for the rest of your life sounds kind of boring. I want to be able to draw in tons of different weird ways. So actually a lot of the time, that's kind of why I was really excited about this today, was I got to draw Pancake Jackie, and I love Pancake Jackie. She's great. And that's not how I usually draw much anymore, you know, and I was excited to get to do that. So yeah, don't worry so much about trying to find your style. Just draw and enjoy what you're doing, and try to learn from other people's work and find what you like about their work and help incorporate it into your own. And then in a few years, someone's going to be able to, I think it was actually my friend, Casey, who told me, he was like, I can tell when you draw characters because of the way that you draw eyes. And I was like, really? You can look at this group of drawings and know which one's mine? He's like, yeah, absolutely, I can, because you have a very distinct way of doing this. And I had no idea until someone else pointed it out to me. So you're going to be the last one. You'll be the last one to know you have a style. And yeah, just don't worry about it. Just draw and have fun.
That is awesome. Definitely takes a little bit of the pressure off, especially to know that maybe following along and picking up bits and pieces of style that you like out of other artists isn't stealing, it's learning, and it's growing as an artist. And thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to do that a little bit with your artwork today.
Absolutely. I can't wait for the next class.
Yes, likewise. And thank you again to everyone who tuned in, who asked such wonderful, thoughtful questions. We really do hope to see that artwork. So don't forget to post on Instagram and tag us here at Varsity Tutors, as well as Audrey. And I'll put all of that up on screen in just a moment. But thank you once again to Audrey Hopkins. We hope to see you back in our next StarCourse collaboration. But in the meantime, we hope to see you in another StarCourse soon. Thanks, everyone.